TeenSpeak, empowering today's youth. TeenSpeak explores the unique strategies and stories of amazing young people from around the globe who are pushing boundaries, overcoming adversity, and achieving greatness. The guests share their personal stories of success, resilience, and courage with an infectious dose of inspiration to help encourage our listeners to create the life they desire. Your hosts, Keith Senzer and Antwaun Thompson, are youth empowerment and leadership coaches that have dedicated themselves to helping teens find their true north by educating, supporting, and inspiring them.
Well, here we are again, another episode of TeenSpeak, empowering today's youth. I am Antwaun Thompson, or Coach T in North Carolina.
And I am Coach Keith in New York.
And we are excited to have you join us today. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, buddy. How you doing?
Oh, I'm always good, man. Always good. I'm about 95% cured from my ailment I had. So I'm getting back to it. I'm glad to say. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not running around or anything, but still having a little trouble cutting the grass. But other than that, I'm good.
That's right. I have trouble getting out of a car after a long ride. So, you know.
Hey, here's the question, though. Do you make noises when you get up and sit down?
Yeah, it sucks getting old.
Hey, listen, if I don't make a noise, that's when I get worried. I'm like, hey, something's wrong with me. I'm not making any noises. But anyway.
I mean, I always say it's mind over matter. I don't feel old until those little situations happen. And then I'm like, okay, I know I think I'm young, but I'm getting old. So
yeah, we are, but you know what? We're still able to do what we love doing, and that's talking about the next generation of leaders. And we got a great topic today. We're going to be talking about communication styles and how parents can improve their communication with their kids, and how kids can improve their communication with their parents. And so we're going to be talking about the 4 basic styles of communication: passive aggressive, and assertive. And Keith, I don't know if you want to kind of just share a little bit about how you see communication styles and how kids can improve their communication with their parents.
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely think, we probably should go over the different styles, but in general, I think a lot of times, look, life gets in the way, right? It's busy. We live in a very distracting world. Like when I was growing up, my dad worked, my mom took off from work when we were younger to take care of us, right? And, it's really hard now for one parent, whether it be mom or dad, to stay home, right? So we have a lot of working families where everybody's working, kids are in school, they got to get carpooled to here and go to this and go to that, and I got to tutor it. So there's so much going on that I think, a lot of times we're tense, so we're stressed, we got a lot on our mind. And I think sometimes with parents and kids, parents react out of, their own frustration, kids react out of their frustration, or parents have a certain way to communicate, certain personality, right? And kids have their certain personality. And when you have communication styles or communicators communicating with different ways of communicating, it doesn't mean their way of communicating is wrong. But a lot of times we communicate the way we communicate, but we don't understand the other person's communication style, right? So for example, like, if you're an aggressive communicator, speaking to somebody who's a passive communicator. Well, a passive communicator is somebody who's like, yeah, whatever, I'm fine, it's all good, right? Like they're just very chill. Yep. But when they go up against somebody who's very direct and aggressive, right? Aggressive doesn't have to mean mean or nasty, just direct and to the point. That can come across like that passive person is being bullied, right?
Yeah.
So the passive person needs to understand, hey, like, I know they don't mean that. This is how they speak. But the aggressive person has to also be like, I know this person's passive. I need to tone it back a little. Otherwise, they're going to feel like I'm bullying them, right? Like nobody talks about that. We don't teach this in school. We don't teach this anywhere, right? I hate to say it, unless you're in therapy with your kids for not getting along, right? Like you're not being taught this stuff. But the truth is, we need to understand how we communicate and what our communication looks like to somebody else who might not share our communication style. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. I would equate that kind of like when people are trying to understand what people's love language is. Same way, because as you were describing that's exactly what I started thinking about. Is there's also the other part I think is an expectation from parents that they think the kids are just going to understand, okay, this is how I communicate, and you need to acclimate yourself to the way I communicate. And then the flip side of that is, kids are thinking, well, this is how I communicate. Mom or dad will understand this is how I communicate. And then there's no common ground that they're coming to. And that's really why I think what we're talking about today is so important, is how to come to that and understanding, like you said, understanding how people communicate and knowing that, like an aggressive person talking to a passive person, I'm not trying to dominate you. It's just, this is how I communicate. And, there just has to be some common ground there.
Yeah, and understanding for each other, right? Like, just because that's how you communicate, like, I get it, that's how you communicate. You absolutely, but just being cognizant of who I'm talking to, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I know we deal with teens, but like, even think about the workplace, right? Like, you get somebody who's like a really hard worker, really good at what they do, but they're really timid and passive and shy. And they've got a boss who's like, rah, 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 gung ho, like, let's do this, right? And like, you're in a meeting and you say something, they're like, there's a better way to do that, right? Like, they don't mean any harm, but that person's going to feel completely like belittled, right? Versus,
Right.
hey, you know what? I like your idea, but can I make another suggestion, right? Like, you're saying the same thing without making effort, but many times it's not intentional.
Yeah. Well, what you just said is that's the trigger right there. Can I make a suggestion? Now that's where you're coming to common ground. Now that person is not going to be defensive. They're like, yeah, what you got? And they're going to be more open to the suggestion, and it creates a little bit more dialogue, possibly, to make them understand kind of where each one's coming from. Because that other person may realize, say, okay, my idea was good, but now that I hear what you've got, yeah, that makes sense, and nobody's feelings are heard, and they understand each other and how they communicate. And then moving forward, they'll know exactly how they're going to start conversations and any conversations.
Yeah, and listen, it takes emotional intelligence.
Yep.
Right. That's the whole thing. What this is really about is having the emotional intelligence to understand who you're talking to and how you appear in the world to others. Right.
Yeah.
Because
Yes,
listen,
absolutely.
we all have our way, and sometimes, like I said, we're busy, we're distracted, we react, right? And sometimes we don't think about like our reaction or our action on something might not be so great in that moment for that person, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? Like, it also, like, I hate to say it, but it's also like you need to tighten up a little bit, and like, don't be so sensitive. Like, you're talking to somebody who's like this. They're not bullying you. They're not trying to make you feel bad. You're entering into a conversation with somebody who this is their nature. So you just have to understand that's their nature. It doesn't mean they shouldn't tone it down too.
Yeah.
But they may not, because they don't have the emotional intelligence. But if you have the emotional intelligence to understand who you're talking to, you can talk to that person and get from them what's coming back at you and let it deflect off, as opposed to like taking it internally and laying upon you, because many times it's not meant. I mean, how many times have you like said something to somebody and they get insulted and you're like, I'm sorry, like, I did not mean that to come across that way, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's almost like people know if they preface a statement by, I don't mean to be, demeaning or not to offend, but, well, when you start with that, you've already put that person on defense, because you're like, but.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't take much, but to your point about emotional intelligence, understanding, okay, like the first example, hey, can I make a suggestion? Can I make a suggestion versus but? I'd be more defensive about the but than I would, can I make a decision? Can I make a recommendation or a suggestion?
100%.
Yeah. So I want to give, as we go through this, we'll start with passive communication. I want just I had an example of each one so we can kind of share, and then we kind of briefly talk about each one of those. And so we'll give an example of a teen and a parent having a conversation, and the teen goes, I was kind of wondering if maybe I could go to a concert tonight. I mean, it's okay if I can't. I don't want to bother you or anything. So that's the teen. And the parent's response, well, I guess you can if you really want to. I don't know. It's fine. Just try not to stay out too late. Okay. So both the teen and the parent are being very passive, not very decisive about their communication there. So what does the kid leave with that? Does the parent really care if they go? Or is the parent going like, I don't care what you do? So to me, neither one are being very clear in their delivery.
Yeah, and and there's like you say, there's no boundaries there, right? Like
Right.
it's kind of like the kid's like, so I can go, or
Yeah.
it's yeah, that's I mean that's if both are passive, right? But
Yeah.
now, you know, imagine the opposite where the parent's aggressive, right? Or the parent's assertive,
Right.
right? And the parent says, I really don't want you to go to a concert tonight, right? Sorry, I don't want you to go, right? Now, in that situation, I think it's fine. That kid's probably going to be like, okay, fine, right? But what if the kid's aggressive? Why
Yeah.
can't I go? You never let me go. Well, it's a school night. So what? I'll go to bed. Like, that's where, and it's like, and the parent's getting upset at the kid. And now it's like, well, now you're never going, as opposed to saying, hey, stop for a second. I know you really want to go. I understand how it makes you feel. Understand you have 2 tests this week. You have this. It's a school night. It's not a good night to go. That's why I'm saying no. If it was another night, you could go, right? Like having the emotional intelligence be like, my kid's aggressive. He's going to get assertive and aggressive about this. So I need to find a way to communicate with him and kind of stop the conversation before it goes derails and goes bad. But when they're both passive like that, forget it. It's like,
Yeah.
and then what ends up happening is one of them is going to do something the other one doesn't want him to do by mistake. And then they're going to get
Right.
mad. And then it's like, but you didn't tell me I couldn't go. But I didn't tell you could go.
Good. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you go. But no, that's absolutely right. I love where you kind of pulled the example of the aggressive parent response to a passive delivery from the teen. That's truly going to put up. It's like that leads to the aggressive part where the kid's like, yeah, you never let me do anything. I don't care what you say. I'm going to go to the concert. Stop trying to control my life. Well,
right.
that's kind of the response that teen would ultimately lead to, because they're going to match that aggressive tone that the parent has.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we kind of talked about, kind of combine the passive and the aggressive, the two different kind of responses. So we got to join those two with passive and aggressive. So here's the teen goes, oh, sure, I'll just stay home again like I always do. I guess my life's supposed to be all homework and no fun. Don't
Mhm.
worry. I'll be boring I'll be boring once a while everybody while everybody else is having fun. So, that's a kind of a passive aggressive. Now, I don't know about you, but if I came across my parents back in the day like that, I probably wouldn't got to finish that because
Oh, no.
I'd be laying on the floor if I ever got passive aggressive with my parents. I never would with my dad, but my mom would have laid me out.
Oh, I gotta be honest. I mean, I find the most frustrating people to deal with are passive aggressive people, right?
Yeah.
I would consider myself an assertive person, right? Sometimes I'm passive, depending on what it is, but for the most part, I'm fairly assertive. I say what's on my mind, but I say it respectfully.
Right.
I hate when people are passive aggressive. Nothing is worse than like, when somebody's trying to like hint to you how they feel or what they want to say, but they won't come out and say it. Because when I talk to a passive aggressive person, sometimes like I'll be honest, like my emotional intelligence is not good. And I'm like, stop doing that crap and just say what the hell's on your
Yeah,
mind.
you want to, yeah,
Right? Like
yeah,
I get very frustrated talking to people that are passive aggressive.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I need to learn how to temper that. But what do you say to that person? Hey, I feel like you're trying to say something or you want to tell me something and you're not really being direct about it. I'd rather you be direct. I can take it, but I'd rather hear what you have to say because it's more frustrating trying to figure out what you're trying to say.
yeah,
Right? Like there's just, but again, it's understanding I'm talking to a passive aggressive person. Like forget it. An aggressive person talking to a passive aggressive person, right? I said I'm assertive and I get frustrated. An aggressive person is going to be like, cut the crap. Like, what the hell do you want?
even when, yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah.
and then that conversation's over. That's just a fight and you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think the other part is you kind of touched on it is if you're repeating what somebody's saying to you, there's two things. One, you're trying to confirm what you heard. Number two, you're repeating to the person, make them understand what they said to you. Because sometimes people don't realize what it is or how they're saying something to you. But if you kind of repeat it back, kind of like the dialogue we're having, there's certain things you say, I kind of keep there. It's like, hey, I'm going to respond to that, or I'm going to make sure I clarify what I heard by repeating what I said. And I think that also may help kind of ease some of that tension when you got that assertive versus that passive aggressive communication style versus talking to somebody that's assertive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
For sure.
so,
For sure.
so and of course, you really talked a lot about the last one is the assertive communication and teens' assertive response to that same scenario. I'd really like to go to the concert tonight. I know it's a school night. I'll make sure I got my homework done before I leave. And if you're really worried about anything, I'll make sure I leave earlier, come back home before the time you've given me. That's clear. And it's letting them know that they're being responsible. Hey, I know that you probably don't want me to go because it's a school night or whatever, but I'm willing to do and compromise, if you will. Make sure I have X, Y, and Z done so that you know I'm being responsible and accountable for wanting to do something.
Yep. And
right?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. There's no wrong communication style. It's
True.
your communication style. What's wrong is when we have our communication style and we're not willing to understand somebody else's. That's where it's a problem. But if you're an assertive communicator, you're an assertive communicator. If you're an aggressive communicator, I mean, I know we're making fun of passive aggressive because it's frustrating, right? But
Yeah.
but honestly, some people that are passive aggressive are struggling with like self-esteem or self-worth, right? And like they're passive aggressive because they really want to say what they have to say, but they're afraid to say it or they're afraid of the action. So they tone it back. Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to apologize right now for even calling people out that are passive aggressive because you know what? I shouldn't do that because it's not their fault. Right. They're like that for a reason. They're scared of something. There's a fear there. Right. And by the way, aggressive people also have a fear. They're aggressive because, they want to bulldoze what they want to say because they might have a fear of like, well, if I'm not aggressive enough, I won't get what I want. Right. So emotionally, all of these different communication styles are there's some reason why we communicate that way, right? An underlying thing. So somebody who's passive aggressive, they're like that for a certain reason. That's what they're used to. That's how they've been communicated to their whole life. So that's what they've picked up and this is how I'm supposed to communicate. But oftentimes people that are passive aggressive are definitely struggling with some insecurity, which is why they're passive aggressive. They're smart enough to not be passive, right? Like I'm not going to let somebody walk over me, but I don't know how to tell that person, no, they can't do this, right? So they hint.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's a thought I had, and this is kind of interesting. And I just thought about where you're saying that. What if you ever thought about a situation where a person changes their communication style based on who they're talking to? That's kind of interesting.
What's interesting about that? So I don't know if we've talked about this. My before I was coaching and all this, I was in the hospitality field. And one of the things they train you on is how to mirror people, right? How mirroring works. And I mean, I could tell you many times where, I was front office manager and, we had to walk somebody or the room that they wanted wasn't available or whatever. And look, there's reasonable people and there's unreasonable people. And you get that person coming up at you and screaming in your face and blah, 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 blah. And they used to always tell us, right? And think about it when you call like a call center and you're pissed off about something. They're always like, sir, I understand how you feel. I'm sorry. I know how you feel. Like when you maintain that calmness, that person eventually comes down to your level. They start off aggressive and they'll keep, you don't understand. I'm like, sir, I do understand. I'm sorry you think I don't understand. I do. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do. I like to help you. Blah, 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 blah. I know. Again, sir, I apologize. I know, like if we could just talk about this, I could. And eventually they come down to your level, right? So there's something positive about matching that, right? When you have an aggressive person who doesn't have the emotional intelligence, right? To kind of like maintain that somewhat passive aggressive or passive personality, they will eventually realize like I'm sounding like a raving lunatic because I'm screaming and this guy's calm or this woman's calm, right? They eventually calm down. Yeah. So there's that. I'm not so sure if I want to go in the other way.
Yeah. So you and I share that common history, having worked in hospitality. So I'm going to give you what you're describing now. I'm going to describe a true story of two aggressive people. And the end results, if you don't understand how to come to some common ground. So this is a Thanksgiving day at a hotel. We got like 800 people coming. My job, I'm the sous chef. I'm just making sure his food stays stocked up on the line. Chef's in the kitchen, making sure that the runners are getting stuff. We have this young kid, and he's probably 19, 20 years old. The chef is a Army vet, was a chef in the Army. So he's running the show. So you can imagine he's very stern and very direct, and has always been very aggressive and assertive, actually. So he tells the kid, hey, the kid's taking something. He goes, chef's like, no, don't take that. And the kid gets really aggressive back with him, and they're going back and forth. And I hear it getting loud, and I come back, and I go back and I'm trying to calm him down. Next thing I know, the chef is going after this guy, both hands around his throat, goes into the break room, and he's just going after him, yelling, he's going to get him. So it's just an example of two like-minded communicators not really understanding, where they're coming from, the lack of respect on the young man's part based on the chef's understanding. And that's a parent-teen dynamic is why I use that example too. You have somebody in a position of authority not respecting that, even though your styles are similar, you still have to respect, where they're coming from. And I think that's where we're talking about with kids. You may not like where your parents are coming from, but you got to respect them as that authority figure in your household.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, that's one thing I do. Listen, respect is earned. And if you're the kind of parent who's just never respectful to your kids, I can understand them not respecting to you, right? But I hate when kids are like, "Well, I don't have to respect you. You have to earn it." Well, no, you're living under this roof. Bills are being paid. You got no expenses. You're getting fed. There comes that you might not have to agree with everything going on, and your parents might be wrong with the way they're treating you. But if you've got that, they at least deserve the basic respect, right? So it's just another thing for teens. When you get pissed at your parents, like there is some level of respect. They still chose to have you, and they're still there raising you. It's one thing if you're being mistreated, abused, that type of thing, and obviously that's a whole nother ballgame, right? You should be going getting help for that. But if your parents are pissing you off because you don't like what they say, what they do, you can't really say to mom and dad, I don't have to respect you. You have to earn it, because if they're taking care of you, making sure that you're well fed and have a roof over your head and everything you need, they deserve your respect.
Yeah. And you just touched on what I was going to say too, is command respect versus demand respect.
Yes.
And, based on what you described, the bare minimums that they're provided on a daily basis, day in and day out, year in and year out, that commands that level of respect. But to your point, if it's beyond that and things are a little different, that's a different level where that respect does have to be earned. But I think it has to be given for that bare minimum of what's being provided with the understanding that it is being provided consistently.
Yeah. And by the way, one of the things we can get into is like, there's ways of having that conversation with your parents. Okay? Like nothing's worse than a parent saying, you're going to respect me because I'm your parent. Like that's not really the best way to get them to do that. Right. Even though you're right, not the best way to do that. And at the same time, saying to your parents, well, you have to earn my respect. No. Right. So there's got to be better ways to communicate. And I think a lot of it too, like I said, a lot of it's just life. Life gets in the way. We're all, look, how many times, I know this isn't on this particular topic, but you and I do social emotional stuff all day long, right?
Yeah.
How many times like your kid comes home in a bad mood and they're angry about something that just happened, but that's not why they're angry. Something else happened, right? And sometimes like you get in this whole fight and it's like hours later when they apologize for their behavior and they're like, I'm sorry I acted like that. This is what happened at school today and it really set me off. Like many times it's never what's actually what you're fighting about is actually not what triggered them. It's something else. And they're triggered all the time until they can resolve that, right? And kids are not always great about sharing how they feel. So, one thing I wanted to talk about, like, so you know the Gottman method, right? You know who that is?
No, I do not.
Oh God, I forgot his first name. Him and his wife. They have like the Gottman Institute. They're more about marriage counseling and communication styles. Now they do a lot with business, like how to communicate business, right? But he's kind of got this 5-step process about communicating, how to communicate properly, right? And it applies to anything, right? And a lot of people don't know this, but like when you communicate, how you communicate and how you share what you need to say will impact how the conversation goes. Like a pyramid, right? So like, like to get to the top of the pyramid, like you got to start at the bottom. And, the first step is like stating what you want to say, right? So like, hey, mom, dad, I want to talk to you about going to this concert, right? Very simple. That's it. No, nothing there, right? Step 2 is sharing how you feel using I statements, not you. Like, you never let me go. You're always so hard on me. You don't trust me. It's, I really want to go to this concert. Um, I can be trusted. I get frustrated sometimes when I'm not trusted because I don't have the ability to show that I can be trusted. I know things are not always safe, but I also know what I need to do to make sure I'm safe. And I'm going to put certain things in place to make sure that if I go, I'm being safe, right? Like, instead of, you don't let me go, you're always telling me it's not safe, right? Like, the minute you say you, person's going to be defensive. When you're using I statements, it opens up the conversation, right? And
Yeah.
then the third step is repeating what you want. So I want to go to that's why I want to go to this concert. I would love you to consider it. I want to hear what you have to think. And the fourth step, which to me is the most important one, is letting them say whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
And you have to listen and you have to validate. And a lot of people look at validation as agreement. And it's really important to understand. It's like acceptance, like radical acceptance, right? Just because you accept something doesn't mean you're okay with it. It just means in the moment, you need to accept this because the alternative isn't good, right?
Right.
So, it's the same thing with communication style. Validating. I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. I understand why you feel that way. I can see your point of view. It doesn't mean you agree with that point of view, but you're letting them know they're heard. You're letting them know that, like, what they have to say has meaning. If you could get to that fourth step, the fifth step's the negotiation. That's where, okay, now you can just have a conversation about it, right? But, like, by the time you get there, you should be in good shape because you both got to share what you needed to hear, what you needed to say. You both got to listen to hear both sides without interruption, right? And you say that, by the way, listen, I'm going to share how I feel. I just need you to listen to me. Please don't interrupt me. And then I'm going to give you all the time you need to respond to me. And I'm not going to interrupt you and I'm going to listen, right? When you have a conversation that way, 9 out of 10 times, you're going to end up with a win-win for both people, right? And when I say win-win, you still might not get to go to that concert, but you're going to have a clear understanding why, and you're not going to be upset about it. You're going to be like, okay, like, I guess that makes sense, right? Or your parents are going to say, okay, you can go. You know what? It's all about the communication. But if you start that off, can I go to this concert? No. Why not? I don't want you going out late at night. You never let me go, but it's just a fight. You're not getting anywhere. They're never going to understand it. The other thing, well, actually, I want you to comment on that.
Oh, no, only thing I was going to add was you just really laid out exactly what kind of response I was going to say is you are also teaching your kids how to communicate based on how you communicate because, we talk about 4 different communication styles. If they're learning how you communicate, if you're always aggressive, that's how they're going to always be because they think that's how they're supposed to be when they get older. This is it Gottman? Is that what you said it's called?
Yeah, Gottman Institute.
Gottman,
Dr. Stephen Gottman, I think it is. Yeah.
That I love it. Those 5 steps, every one of those makes so much sense. And I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. By the time you get to step 5, it's a win-win because the fact that both sides listen without interruption, that means that they're actually valuing their opinion and their feedback. And it also opens door for any other future communications. If they use that approach, man, that's a household I'd love to live in because everybody has freedom to express themselves without being judged or even demeaned.
Yeah. The other thing is, and I've had this conversation with a lot of my teens. Look, sometimes parents are tough, right? I hate to say it. They're not great with regulating their own emotions, right? They're just not. Like, they don't listen. They don't hear you. They just respond to everything, right? Like, it's hard to talk to a parent like that who isn't willing to communicate, right? So the other thing, which I tell a lot of my kids, is like they have a lot on their mind, a lot they're struggling with. Like they just, and I'm like, write them a letter. Write your parents a letter. Dear Mom, I have a lot on my mind. There's a lot of things I want to say. I feel like when I do say them to you in the moment, you don't have time to process it. So you get mad at me and we end up getting in a fight. I'm writing this because I want you to read this when I'm not around so you can really read it, process it, and then we can have a conversation. And like, it's a great way for a teen to kind of just vomit everything on their mind, get it off their chest. But because they're writing it and they know they're going to give it to their parent, they're going to be a little more respectful about how they write it. And they're going to say to the parent, listen, I wrote this letter I want you to read. It's a lot about how I've been feeling lately. And I don't want you to read it in front of me because I feel like if you read it in front of me, you might get triggered by something and then we're going to get in a fight. But if you read it and then you sit with it and process it, we can talk about it later. And I think there'll be a much better way for me to understand you and for you to understand where I'm coming from. Maybe we can, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I do that all the time. And I can't tell you how many times kid will say to me, I'm so glad you told me to write that letter. My mom read it or my dad read it and they felt so bad. They didn't realize they were being that way. Like, because 9 out of 10 times they don't realize it. But when your kid is pouring it out to you and like saying, this is how I feel, this is how you're making me feel when these things happen, no parent wants to see that.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes they're like, you know what, you're right. We need to talk. And you have a talk and you fix it.
Yeah. The part I like the most about that is when you said for them to read it when they're not around, so the parent can't react to what they're reading right off the, right away. It's like, well, no, I don't do that, and they don't finish reading it because they're triggered by something that they don't like when they're reading it. So I
Yeah.
love that part of it, but it's a great thing. And the funny thing is, Keith was telling that first thing I thought about was when my dad was overseas, we used to write letters to him, and I had a situation and I was like, my dad's not here, but he's somebody I trust and I know I can open up to. And I was having girl problems, if you will, right? So I write this letter to him, and about a month later, I get a reply back. Man, it was the coolest thing. And basically, he said in the letter, he's like, son, do you think just because you have a car and you got a job, the girls just gonna come run to you? It's not the job and the car that attracts them, it's you. So how are you presenting yourself, not your job and your car? But I just thought about that when you're talking about letters. And I still have that letter to this day, and my dad's been gone for 30 years. But it's just an example of something. And the reason I bring that up too is the parent, after reading that letter and having the conversation later, I'd like to think that the parent will always keep that letter so that they will be able to go back and see how their relationship evolved because of that communication approach.
And listen, there's bad people out there. There's bad parents, and like I said before, if you've got a parent that's abusive, whether it's emotionally or physically, like you need to get help. You need to tell somebody at school, a trusted adult, right? But for the most part, I think most parents would be upset that they made their kid feel that way. Listen, I will say this one thing I love my son. So like my daughter is passive aggressive in many ways, right? Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
My son is assertive, and like, look, I know you and I do this for a living, right? And I like to think we're really good at what we do and how we communicate, but we're not perfect.
No.
I'm not perfect. I have plenty of times where I get distracted or I'm busy and like I lose my SHIT, right? Like it happens.
Right.
And the one thing I love about my son is he will say to me, hey, like, why are you talking to me like that? This isn't going to go anywhere. Like, why don't you go calm down and let's talk about this? Like, he will call me out, he will call me out on it. And every time he does that, thank God, doesn't happen often, but when he does, I stop and I'm like, you know what, dude, you're right. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to wash my face. I'm going to come back downstairs. We're going to talk about this. And it always ends up being like a really good conversation. But he will call me out on my shit in a respectful way. He's not like rude. He doesn't yell. He'll be like, why are you yelling at me? Like yelling at me is just going to make me more upset and trigger me. And then I'm not going to be able to have a conversation. Like, please don't yell at me. Let's just talk about this.
Yeah.
Stops
I like
me.
that.
It stops me in my tracks. Like I stop and I'm like, oh my God, he's so right. Like I'm being such an ass right now, and like, now again, I have good emotional intelligence. I'm not going to take that personal. I'm so grateful that he's willing to call me out and try to change the direction of the conversation. Some parents aren't going to be so good with that, but let me tell you, if your kid's doing that, listen to them because they're trying to communicate with you.
Yeah, I like that. The fact that you're willing to listen to your son tell you that. Some parents
It ain't
will
easy.
no, I'm sure it's not easy, but you mentioned a couple times, there are some good parents and there's some that are not. And I'm afraid the ones that aren't wouldn't be open to listening, and they would retaliate, don't tell me what I need to do, kind of thing. And obviously that conversation goes nowhere. But what's interesting also, I mentioned earlier about teaching your kids how to communicate. Well, you've also given your kids the freedom to kind of develop their own style of communication. And being that his is different from yours, you can learn from his communication style, because you're willing to. And also, it doesn't hurt that you do this for a living too, because you understand kind of where he's coming from. But it's still a lesson to be learned for other parents.
Yeah, 100%. Communication's a big, big thing. And like, we're not taught communication in schools. Like my programs that I teach at schools, there is a chapter on effective communication. I teach these strategies. I teach all this because it's so important for kids to understand that, because they don't learn this in school.
Yeah.
When they understand this, a lot of times it's like all of a sudden they're like, my friend's passive aggressive, my friend's aggressive. Like they start to identify the people that they interact with and like what kind of communicators they are.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like you see it, and then they'll come back and talk about their experience. They're like, oh my God, like, we spoke about communication last week. And then I realized this person's this, and I started reacting differently. Because what do they always say? If you don't like the way things are happening, you have to change the way you're approaching. Because if you keep doing the same thing, Einstein's different. You're not going to get a different result, right? It's just frustrating.
Yeah.
But if you don't like the way things are, you have to change how you approach those things. And when you change that, it forces the other person to change that.
Yeah, just like was the definition of insanity, right?
Right. That's what I said, Einstein, right? That's the definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over and expecting
different result. Yeah, it's not going to happen. But no, that's a perfect example. I love that you're teaching that at schools, because to your point, that these are things that kids are not being taught. But guess what? This is that emotional intelligence growth that they need exposure to. Because not only does it help their relationship in communication, but it also helps their learning too. I mean, when you think about teachers, teachers teach differently too, and kids retain information based on how it's delivered to them. Sure. And if they don't understand how it's being delivered, they're not going to retain it, or they're going to resist the ability to retain it. But yeah, this is a conversation in communication. So it's always my big thing whenever I'm talking with kids is all about communication. And to your point, we communicate differently with the kids that we work with, because they have different ways of communicating, and also how they react. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm talking to kids, obviously I'm looking them right in the eyes. Their eyes tell you everything, and how they respond. The way they listen with their eyes tells you how you're going to communicate with them. I know that's my way of how I determine how to communicate with kids.
Yeah. And there's two other points I wanted to bring up on this. One is like the whole point of communication with like generational, right? Like these kids text. That's how they communicate. I do get frustrated sometimes when, I'm trying to have a conversation and I'm like, just call me, right? But the truth is, like, we get mad at them, but it's like, this is how they communicate. It's not
right.
I don't agree with it. I still think it's so bad to not have eye-to-eye contact or phone call, but like we have to understand, like, their generation communicates differently, So like I have this rule with my kids. I'm like, I understand texting is the way to communicate. I'm going to be accepting of that. But if I say to you, this is not a text conversation, you have to respect that.
Yeah.
And they do, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they text me stupid stuff. I'm like, oh my God, why can't you just call me about this, right? But then it's like, I'm serious, so you don't feel good right now. Okay, this is not a text conversation. You need to pick up the phone, call me so we can talk about what's going on, right? Like, so that's part of communication, right? Like letting them, hey, I'm okay with this. I'm really not, because it's not how I communicate, but I respect this is how you.
Yeah, this is how you communicate.
And I'm going to give you that because it's important to you as a Gen Zer, right? But you just need to respect me, that if it's something more detailed or more serious, that's like a little more impact, I'm not going to be comfortable with that. I need you to respect that and hop on a call. And my kids do that,
Yeah, and you're also teaching them that not just with you, but with other people too, is, determining when is this a textable topic, or when is this a phone call, or I'll wait till I see you to have that conversation. So it's a teaching moment, not just related to you, but just in general, teaching them that, hey, you have to be able to set the boundaries of what's a text conversation, what's an in-person, or what's a phone call conversation.
Yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up, it's kind of related to communication. Well, it is related to communication, but I think a lot of parents struggle now with, how do I raise my kids, right? Because we've got this whole thing now about, like, we have to be aware of their emotion. I mean, I'm all about emotional regulation and teach them. But I think the difference is, it's like anything, right? Look what's going on in our country with the extremes. There's extremes with parenting. There's, suck it up and deal with it. I did, right?
I
Which,
did.
by the way, that's kind of how I was raised. My parents had some empathy for a lot of things, but like there were certain things like, if you fell and scratched your knee at Little League practice, you started crying, be like, my dad would be like, get up and walk it off. You're fine. Stop crying. Right.
Yep.
And then there's the other extreme where it's
Gentle
like,
parenting.
oh, come here. Let me put a band, right? Like, the problem is neither extreme's good. And I think, a lot of this generation, has grown up with this like coddling, right? So, and it doesn't build resilience or grit. It actually builds weakness in them, right? Like they haven't failed. You have snowplow parents and, what do they call snowplow parents,
Yeah.
helicopter parents, right?
Helicopter. Yeah.
Like I get it as a parent. I'm anxious. I want my kids to be happy, healthy, right? But it's so hard for us. But when we let them fail, we're willing to let them have some adversity, they're going to grow from it. It's going to hurt in the moment, and we're going to feel the hurt with them, probably more because it hurts us more as parents than it does them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even our perception of how much it hurt them might not even hurt them as much as we think. But to us, it's like, right? Like I saw somebody post something about my daughter's new job, right? Without getting into detail, like a very passive aggressive comment. And I wanted to go on there and comment. And my daughter's like, Dad, she's an idiot. So just everybody's going to see she's an idiot by her post. Just leave it up.
Right.
She goes, I'm not even
Right.
responding. And I'm like it bothered me more than it bothered her.
Bother
right.
her. Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to get at is like, if you're a parent listening to this, like it is important to be empathetic. It is important to like show concern. It is important to be there for them and to, guide them. But you got to also let them fail. You got to let them feel the pain sometimes, and you got to be okay with that, because if we coddle them, they expect it, and they become entitled, and they expect everything to be a certain way and go a certain way. And like, that they're not going to turn into a healthy adult, and
Yeah.
we see it now. I mean, like, look, kids in their 20s are like really struggling to find jobs right now. But a lot of it is because, well, I don't like the question they asked me on the interview, my son did it the other day. He's trying to get a job at the post office, and they asked him to fill out a half hour exam. Now I got to take a test. I'm like, Brett, it's a federal test. You have to take this exam before you can even apply for a federal government job. Like this is, like either take the test, don't get the job. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Right. Like, but when I see those things, I get so frustrated. I'm like, where did I go wrong with that? Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is just like communication, you got to communicate in a way where you're giving them what they need. You're giving them the support and the scaffolding and the strong foundation for them to go out in the world and do what they need to do. But at the same time, it's as long as the foundation's strong, it's okay if the building falls. They'll just have to get up and rebuild it,
Yeah.
And that's how they learn, and that's how they get grit, and that's how they get resilience, and that's how they learn, grow, and become better. If you're a parent listening, it's really important to just not get so hung up on what happened to them, but more about how can I support them without getting in the way.
And I'll just add that it's really important sometimes to tell your kids what they need to hear versus what they want to hear. And it kind of goes along with what you're saying with communication, because a lot of times they just want to appease their kids by telling them what they want to hear so they can move on. What they don't realize is they're planting seeds that these kids are always going to expect to be told what they want to hear versus what they need to hear. And I tell kids, I'm not here to tell you what you need to hear, what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. Sometimes it may be what you want, but from my perspective, I think it's what you need. And I think that what you're talking about is absolutely 100% right. And it's the only way to build strong, resilient kids and future leaders, because we can't have people in leaderships that are passive, because some of these decisions that have to be made are big decisions, and you have to be, what's the word? You got to be confident when you're making those decisions. You can't have any self-doubt. And that starts at how you're being raised and being in a secure household that, number one, teaches you about being a communicator that knows what they want, but also respecting how people communicate with you and accepting what's being said and learn from what's being said to you or how it's being said to you.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's the world we live in. We just have to, we have to learn to trust our kids, and it's their journey, right? They don't all look the same. And some of them are straight lines and some are circles and some are zigzags and some are, whatever. But at the end of the day, if we let them live their journey, it's their journey. They will find, as long as we're there to guide them, they'll find their path. Sometimes it takes longer, but we have to trust the process. So
100%, man. As always, man, this has always been great to have a conversation with you, because I actually learn stuff talking to you, but also
likewise.
I find out things about how I can get better at what I'm doing too. And I hope that our listeners are doing the same thing. Even if a lot of what we said, you understood, if there's one thing that popped out to you, hey, jot it down, just share it with somebody, because what we're trying to do is set both parents and teens up for success, not just in their households, but outside their households. And we really appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts and our experiences with you. And if you have a teen or a preteen that'd like to be a guest on our show, we'd love to have them on. I know we're going to, Keith's talked about a couple of experts that he'd like to have on. I think it would be great to add on. But if you do, we both have guest forms on our websites. Keith's is shiftyourpower.com and mine is coachtcorner.com. We'd love to hear from you. Love to have you on the podcast, because I know we're aging gentlemen, but I think we have a little bit of pizzazz left. But listen, we need some better looking people on here with us. No offense, my friend.
None taken.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. That's why I said it. I know you would take offense, but thank you so much, my friend. Always a pleasure, and I'm looking forward for us doing this again real soon.
Likewise. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you to the next episode. Take care.
Are you looking for an experienced youth empowerment and leadership coach to help your teenager find their true north? Look no further. Let Coach Keith and Coach T show you how, through education, support, and inspiration. Visit their websites, shiftyourpower.com and coachtcorner.com, respectively, to learn more about the services they offer and to book a session today.